more humble.
So it's crazy.
I feel like the internet give you the act.
Man, welcome back to another episode of the Think Successfully Room. This is a platform where we focus on building mindsets. We building character, bringing value to both you and your people, and aligning your body with your intelligence. I am your host, QB So Effing Amazing. And right now, we got a special guest, Dr. Jake.
What's going on, yo?
Man, how you feeling, man?
Man, I'm feeling great.
Man,
Happy to be here, I tell you.
Yeah, appreciate you for coming to the Think Successfully Room, man.
Yeah, I love what y'all do, man. It's always nice to be around people that heighten minds, you know? It's all about increasing the leveling of our society, man. It takes one or two. Let's just keep going.
Yeah, man. So as always, you know, this is a platform where I strive to provide value to the people, you know. So if I ask you to come on as a guest, it's because I feel like you are an individual that have power behind what you say, and it can resonate with whoever chooses to watch this content.
Right on.
So man, so it was a book you put me on to Why Do We Sleep?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a few topics. I haven't had the chance to go through the entire book, but there are a few topics that I do want to touch base on. I guess the first would be the downfall of caffeine and why it's bad for the body. The second would be sleeping pills, right? Because I have a lot of people around me that have a hard time sleeping at night, so they turn to things like Benadryl or whatever drug, over-the-counter drug they can get their hands on to help them go to sleep at night.
Yeah, and that's definitely it's funny, man, because you look at our society and it's one of those nonchalant things, you know. I mean, starting off with coffee, and now coffee is not the worst thing in the world for you, but depending on when you take it, it's definitely going to have a side effect, and side effects you got to pay attention to because they're not always on the label, man. You just got to use some common sense and start educating yourself, because, you know, sometimes you get around this deal where something is over the counter doesn't mean it's right for you.
Right, that's a fact.
And it doesn't mean that it's going to be healthy for you, but they're willing to put labels on things to dull that fact down. And so it becomes just commonplace until eventually you get in this cyclical cycle that causes some issues, and you might not understand why. So I think that's what you're really trying to get to is let's get down to the root and figure out, okay, what is the reasoning that first of all these things can have a problem and become a further problem if you keep using them, and what is the reason why you take it in the first place. And if you don't have a solution to that problem, then you're going to go for the low-lying fruit. And so hopefully we could find different methods to be able to substitute something that might be an easy go-to.
Yeah, man. So man, it's I'm not really sure, but I think I think what it is we lack the because all it is, man, if you find yourself not being able to sleep at night, all it is taking a little bit of research, right?
Sure.
But I feel like a majority of us are lazy, and we don't want to take that step to do further research into figuring out why we are not sleeping, and we refuse to seek help. And the only thing we can turn to is the sleeping pills.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So obviously this is something that everybody is doing, and I think we just need to realize that it's not always the healthy thing to do, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, it may seem like it's helping you as far as getting you to sleep, but are you really getting the quality sleep that you need? Right. Because at the end of the day, these pills are it could kill you over time.
Yeah, so I think if we're going to start somewhere, let's start by why do we sleep?
Yeah,
I mean, it's the title of the book, but it does tell more to why we sleep is the reason. If you don't, the reason you have anxiety, the reason why you might go to is something that might be an easy fix. And so understanding what sleep is kind of the root of what you need to tackle. Because if you don't understand that, then you're not going to make it a priority. If you don't make it a priority, then you're going to make it something that you're just gonna slip into. So you work your day, and then all of a sudden you gotta sleep because you know you're gonna be miserable in the morning. So how do you do that?
Right. So so it's crazy because when you first brought up the book at the time, I was actually having I was sleeping, but I think what was bothering me is the fact that when I was when I was asleep, I wasn't dreaming, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to dream, and dreaming is very important to me because that's where I be the most creative. That's where all my ideas come from, is being able to dream, right? So when I read this book, it really gave me a better insight on what needs to be done as far as my quality of sleep, and I realized it was the caffeine.
Yeah.
The caffeine it wasn't providing me the quality sleep that I needed. And the moment that I cut it out of just my life completely, I began to be able to have these dreams that I couldn't have prior to that.
That's so true. So when you look at caffeine has a half-life of a certain amount of time. And when you say half-life, is how long does it take for that half of that product to be out of your system? And you're looking at 4+ hours with caffeine. And so if you have just a molecule around 6 o'clock, that means still at 10 o'clock, you're still somewhat wired. Even though you might not perceive yourself wired, your brain is overactivating. And so what transpires is it never properly takes the signaling in from your brain and your body and the different other methods that might be screaming, hey, listen, it's time to go to sleep. Somehow we got this opportunity to have free choice, and so it allows us to ignore this issue. And it puts us down a rabbit hole that keeps us up to where eventually we try to go to sleep. It's already past that time, and the brain's already going through the second stage of staying up. And so, first of all, we have to know that there's periods of time that we might have to pay attention to our bodies and what's going on in order to follow through with exactly what it's telling you. So being in tune is one of the first steps that you could do, being in tune with where you're at and what your body is. And if you can, get in routine to follow that up each night, so that way it becomes not as second guessing for yourself, but it becomes a thing that you just do. Just like someone works out, guess what? If they work out long enough, they're going to be the guy that works out.
Yeah.
If you're the guy that goes on a routine to go to sleep, then eventually you're going to be the guy that sleeps.
Yeah, so could you explain what happens? Like, because it's a battle between when you consume caffeine. It's a battle between caffeine and then the chemical that plays a part in your brain, the adenosine, right? So the adenosine builds pressure up over time the longer that you are up.
Exactly.
And then when that pressure gets to a certain point, this is what causes you to feel tired and sleepy. Could you explain the process of the caffeine and how it blocks the receptors that communicates with that adenosine?
Yeah. So here's the problem with just about any drug. In order for it to be a drug, it has to have a synthetic response to a receptor. And so it could work on some receptors that are exactly what it's there for, but it could also work on receptors that are similar, and somehow it just smooths it all in and takes that receptor over. So there's not enough chemical transponding to other parts that it needs to be able to get the reaction that you're looking for. And so adenosine is something that needs to be built up throughout the day. And then once you hit the max, what it does is it tells your body to sleep. All right, which is different than melatonin, which everybody uses to say, okay, this is what I'm going to use to go to sleep. All that is like the shotgun at the beginning of the race. It's telling you, hey, listen, it's time, but it doesn't mean you have to start running. Adenosine is the pressure that builds up that eventually just puts you out. And so if you're taking something that takes the receptor of adenosine to a point to where it never gets to the point where it builds up pressure enough, then you never get to that response that you have to go to sleep. And so it extends your life, your lifespan during that day or a couple of days to eventually just letting the caffeine wear out, and then you start over again. And that's where people get in this insomnia type of response, where they need something to put themselves to sleep because the adenosine never hit. It never got to the point to where it says, all right, go to sleep. So they need something else to take the pressure off.
Okay, so so because we are on the topic about caffeine, right? So caffeine also, right? So it gives you a false sense of being alert, right? So your brain is never really fully functioning the way that it could if you were to really, if you would have just got the quality sleep that you needed. So it was a study, right, that the book talks about of a scientist, right, that had 4 different spiders, right? One spider was on LSD, I believe. One was on marijuana. One was on caffeine, and then one was just not under the influence of anything, right? So they paid attention to the patterns of the webs that was being created by these spiders, right? So it seemed like the spider that was under the influence of caffeine couldn't make a web efficient enough for it to be able to walk across that web. It couldn't even catch its own food with that web. So after reading that, and they had illustrations in the book as well to demonstrate what the web looked like. So it just proves how our mind works when we take caffeine, right? Because our mind is just not functioning the same way. So it kind of remind me of the web that spider created.
Yeah, and that's an interesting study because you're talking about something that weighs a couple grams, right? So it's going to obviously have a little more effect than our minds, but it has a time and a place, but it's not something that should be ritually put together, and there should be a time that you also say, okay, this is the shut-off point. Otherwise, you will go down that rabbit hole. Yeah. So the big thing that I see with any type of thing that's going to inhibit your sleep or enhance your sleep unnaturally is the different cycles that you need to be able to get the proper sleep. So I think when you talk about, okay, what caffeine really does, it might not be immediate, but withstanding not get to the proper cycles during your sleep is going to have a long-term effect on your health. And I think that's where the biggest topic is not what caffeine can do, but the side effects of not getting the proper sleep dosage, and what caffeine prevents from that is the real thing. So some people have a little more sensitivity to this, and some people won't. And so everybody looks at each other and says, well, he could do 2 cups. Why can't I do that? And trying to keep up with the Joneses, and the next person is having a bigger issue having sleep, or the other person responds differently. There is a makeup component to that.
So I got a question for you. So if there say like if there is a night, right, where you probably up late, you got work to do, maybe on the computer, paperwork, whatever the case may be, and you feel tired, right? That adenosine reaches its max peak, and it's telling you like, look, Dr. Jake, it's time to go to sleep. It's time to go to bed, right? Would you ignore that and maybe take a cup of coffee, maybe consume caffeine to try to stay up longer, or will you just let the adenosine take over and just go to sleep and then wake up the following morning and get back to the work?
Yeah, so I mean, my response now is absolutely not. My response when I was in med school,
oh yes, man,
might have been different because you had to get things done.
Yeah.
And here's what's funny is I learned pretty quickly that if I actually had a good night's sleep, whatever I absorbed had a better chance of getting filed and redispersing. Because here's the problem. All right, you go to sleep. You go through your first non-REM cycle. That's everything that you took in through the day. Everything you took in from the day is trying to file. So let's say that's the first outline of all these different pages and whatnot, and it's just sitting on the floor, and it says, okay, that falls in line with this guy. That falls in line with this guy, and you're organizing, right? And it's just a quick organization. If you stopped right there, then you just have a bunch of papers everywhere. You wake up the next day, it's still unorganized.
Right.
You don't know what's actually on those papers.
Right.
And so the next phase is, all right, so let's take a look at this and let's actually file them in certain areas through the day. And this isn't just like, okay, what happened? It's talking about, okay, emotionally, what happened? Emotionally, what did I occur today? Emotionally, what type of anxiety did I have? Why would I have that response? All these things are figured out when you're sleeping. And so the first 4 REM cycles that you're doing is basically organizing everything and filing
just
away
saying,
to where
fire.
eventually you get to REM sleep. And that's the long-term emotional filing cabinet, to where now you could correspond. Okay, I had anxiety to this today because it reminded me of that, and that correlated to this. And now you actually have a response that is functional and not irrational because the brain has figured it out. Now, if you disconnect that, then what you have is you have anxiety that builds up day in and day out. You don't have an understanding why. And so what happens? You find a low-lying fruit to be able to put you under,
Yeah.
because you're like, man, I can't keep doing this. Anxiety's built up. I just need a release. And so whether it is, okay, I'm anxious because of work, and so you take caffeine to stay up and you don't get the proper sleep. So guess what? You don't function as well the next day. And so your habits are going awry. And so this becomes a cyclical cycle. That's what I mean. Cyclical cycle becomes a thing that compounds on itself. And if you keep doing this, eventually there's either going to be a burnout mode. You find some way to function over years, over decades sometimes. However, it's going to catch up to you.
Mm-hmm.
A healthy brain knows it's unhealthy. An unhealthy brain may think it's healthy, but eventually signs start building up. And so that's where the long-term thought process of what sleep is. That's what I meant when we started talking. Understanding why we sleep is way more important than how do we go to sleep or this or that. Understanding the side effects that occur if you don't get these proper filing cabinets put away and put it away rationally, then you're not going to be the functional person that you're supposed to be. You're going to be a compensatory. You're going to be the compensatory effort of yourself day in and day out.
So I wanna add on to that, just in case that analogy went over a lot of their heads, cause it's crazy. It's almost like you read my mind or something, man. Cause I was finna get into that. So it was like so pretty much what you were saying. I guess try to put this in a simplest term, in a simple way. So it was an experiment that was done on a rat, right? That they put a rat in a maze, right? The rat was having a hard time trying to figure out how to complete the maze. So the moment that the rat fell to sleep, it got exhausted, it went to sleep. They did studies on the brain, right? And they realized that the brain was solving the maze while the rat was asleep. And because the rat got the proper sleep, and the brain was able to figure out the maze while the rat was asleep, it got up and was able to complete the maze. Mm-hmm. The same thing is, it works the same with us humans, right? Have you ever been, let's say it's a night, you up late, you trying to figure out a solution for something. You can't quite put your finger out on it, on how to complete this or how to come up with this solution. But, you figure like, look, I'm just go to sleep, I'm sleep on it. And you happen to get up, and for some reason you now have the solution of what you didn't have the previous night. This is because your mind, your brain was figuring out what you couldn't figure out because you were tired. So it did the work for you. So the moment you got up, the moment you got up from your sleep, your brain had already figured up and came up with the solution for you. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much what you're saying with that analogy, right?
That is. Yeah. There's another great one in the book, man. I can't remember his name. We talked about him before, but I think it was a Russian dude that was working on the periodic table. And this guy has worked on this. It seemed like years trying to figure out. Okay, there's things that should be spotted. This should go here. That should go there. And he would make little cards, like playing cards, and he would try to put them all together, to the point to where he was up at 3-4 days in a row trying to figure this out until he almost drove himself crazy. And he went to sleep for 2 days and woke up and just started playing with the cards and found the perfect order. You think that's an accident?
Nah, that was the brain. That was the brain working, solving it for you while you was asleep.
So what do you think is smarter, your conscious or unconscious brain?
You said what's smarter? Man, it's the subconscious.
Yeah,
It's the subconscious.
So guess what's taking all the cues? Guess what? You know, you go to a job interview and you're looking at all the things and you're trying to take everything in. Your subconscious is taking it all in. Your conscious is trying to put it together so you react accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take your conscious part out and you work unconscious, right? You talk about, one of my favorite players, Michael Jordan. I'm in Michael Jordan country now.
Yeah.
Right? When you talk about him, he's unconscious. Guess what? He's not thinking, right?
Right.
He's using everything, all the cues, everything to incorporate what he needs to do to get the exact task done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about this. If you really want to put it under, is when you're sleeping, you're in the zone all the time. If you get to the right cycles. And if you think about it like that, and you think of how important it is, then you'll start putting time into finding the basic things that you could do to get the proper not sleep, but the stages of sleep, so you can be the best human being you can the next day.
Oh, that's man, this conversation alone is exciting, man. It's real interesting, man. We got to make sure that we we got to make sure we definitely, when we got the time, we got to make sure we do a part 2 with Dr. Johnny as well, man.
Oh, of course.
That way, because there's so many different topics in the book that we could touch on that's very educational for people to know. You know, for the ones that can't find the proper sleep, it's a lot of different methods they could take in that book, and it'll get them a basic understanding. So, man, without that, man, Dr. Jake, man, appreciate you for coming through, man.
Sure thing. Can I just mention one thing?
Oh,
I want a solution. I want a solution for people, right? Okay. Just going through this. And I remember I was talking to a patient of mine, and of course I bring up sleep. How you sleeping? And she's like, man, I can't sleep. I don't understand. I'm just always, and I'm like, okay, so what's your routine? Do you have a routine? All right. Do you have all the lights out? Do you make sure you don't, not looking at your phone too long right before you go to bed? Do you have a nice peaceful hour before you go to bed? And she's like, yeah, I try to do all that. And I was like, well, listen, I've been reading this book while you sleep, and I think it'd be really interesting. It has a lot of good topics that you could scan through and you could figure out some to-dos. And she's like, you know what? I don't like reading. Every time I read, I go to sleep. Put my hands up and say, well, there's your solution. How about reading before you go to bed? So just find things that if you go through the day normally that gets you tired, then think about, okay, why that is. And it might be something that exhausts a certain portion of the brain that your brain wants to shut off. Well, use that to your advantage, man. That's an easy solution. There's something like that for everyone, whether it's math or this or that. We tune out. So all of a sudden our brain just says, all right, peace, I don't want to do it. And you might get tired. Use that to your advantage.
That's fucked up, man. Excuse my language, man, but man, because I like reading, man. I enjoy reading. So the fact that she couldn't sleep and she picked up a book and she out of there, man. That's funny, man. All right, man. Well, man, appreciate you for sliding, man. Yeah. Man, yeah, definitely appreciate you for coming, man. Look, we're gonna close this out, y'all. Life is good. Life is wonderful. Be blessed to be alive. Self-sufficiency is how you survive. To the kings and queens, to the guys and goddess, forever and always, think successfully. Yeah.